Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shereen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you this evening.
On this dark horizon you described is a bright spot.
The head of the International Monetary Fund calls India a bright spot on a dark horizon, says India can become the voice of the emerging economies as it looks to assume the leadership role at the G20. Also backs India's call for IMF to take the lead in regulating cryptocurrencies, says we cannot allow it to become the wild, wild west. That's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Do you anticipate that 2023 is going to be far worse than 2022?
It would be worse.
The IMF chief warns that 2023 could be worse than 2022 for the global economy, says 60% of low-income countries and 25% of emerging economies are currently facing debt distress. Calls on nations facing troubles to approach the IMF as early as possible without any stigma. India is well positioned to ride out an economic slowdown, says the Group Chief Executive of HSBC, Noel Quinn, expects domestic demand and foreign fund flows to remain strong. That's another exclusive. The Sensex and the Nifty gain over 2% this week. FIIs are back on the Lal Street as they pump in more than $6 billion in April. Financials and capital goods sectors see the most inflows. UK and the world mourn the death of Queen Elizabeth II. India declares a one-day mourning on the 11th of September. India bans the export of broken rice and imposes a 20% tax on exports of non-basmati rice to boost domestic supplies. India is the second largest rice exporter after China, commands a 40% share of global trade. Federal Bank will never merge with any other bank, says CEO Shyam Srinivasan. Adds it could consider acquiring businesses with high margins and a quality franchise. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman initiates a crackdown on illegal loan apps, asks the RBI to prepare a white list of legal apps. The Ministry of Electronics and IT will ensure only those apps deemed legal be hosted on app stores. On World Electric Vehicle Day, Tata Motors says it aims to sell 50,000 EVs in this financial year. M&M is also accelerating its electrification plans. Multiplex chains PVR and Inox cumulatively lose over 800 crores in market capitalization as mega-budget Hindi movie Brahmastra opens to tepid reviews from critics and viewers. Made on a budget of 410 crores, the Ranbir Kapoor-Alia Bhatt starrer is the most expensive Bollywood film to date. Well, let's start with the day's market action. The Sensex and the Nifty ended the day and the week with healthy gains. So for the week, both indices are up 2%, snapping a two-week losing streak. The Nifty Mid-Cap Index gained for the 11th consecutive week and the Nifty Bank Index gaining for the third straight week. So it turned out to be a week belonging to the bulls. Mutual fund data for the month of August indicates that equity inflows have now slipped to 10-month lows. According to AMPI data, net investment into equity and equity-linked schemes declined 29% from the previous month to 5,942 crores. This marks the third straight month of decline in inflows, but the 18th continuous month of investments into such stock plans. Meanwhile, retail participation in SIPs were robust, hitting all-time highs of 12,694 crores. Foreign institutional investors are back with a bang on the Lal Street. August saw FIIs pump in more than $6 billion, which is the highest for a single month since November 2020. Financials and capital goods are the top of the list for FIIs. Healthcare has seen investments of over 8,600 crore rupees, but that was largely due to the Max Healthcare block deal. The big exclusive this evening, India is a bright spot on a dark horizon. That's the word coming in from the chief of the IMF. With India set to take up the G20 presidency, Kristalina Georgieva says India can now become the voice of emerging economies. In an exclusive conversation with me, she's also backed India's call for the IMF to prepare a regulatory mechanism for cryptocurrencies. Sharing the IMF's outlook on the global economy, Georgieva warned that 2023 could be worse than 2022, underlining that 60% of low-income countries and 25% of emerging economies are currently facing debt distress. Take a look.
India, on this dark horizon you described, is a bright spot. And it is not by coincidence. It is the outcome of reforms India has undertaken, especially in the field of digitalization. And second, that India is truly poised for its big moment on international stage. As it takes over the G20 presidency, it has a lot to offer from its own experience, and it is going to be leading in a particularly challenging time.
But I want to understand from you the role that India can play as it takes on the G20 presidency. For instance, in your conversations with the finance minister, I understand that she urged the IMF to take a proactive role as far as global regulations on cryptocurrency is concerned. So what do you believe can be the role that India, in coordination with the IMF, can play on some of these crucial issues?
I see three areas where we can work very productively together. We can support the Indian presidency. First, with strengthening the multilateral system. It is now being challenged. There are forces of fragmentation, and they're going to be damaging for emerging markets and developing economies. Let's remember that the emerging world quadrupled its economy in the last 3 decades, and 1.3 billion people have been lifted out of poverty, largely because of international cooperation. So there is a lot at stake, and India will be speaking on behalf of emerging markets and developing countries. We will be supporting that wholeheartedly. The world is changing very rapidly, especially in the area of digital. It was put on steroids by the pandemic, and in the world of money, both CBDCs and crypto stablecoins have emerged very strongly, but they're not regulated. So India is right to call on the IMF to make sure that crypto is not the new wild, wild west. And we are very aligned in how we think about the necessity of regulation. We intend to dedicate a team to work specifically on the issue of crypto, bring the two other key agencies, BIS and FSB, so together we can have a more pragmatic, with clear deliverables, roadmap towards more regulated space. We have about 25% of emerging market developing economies at or near that distress. Sri Lanka is a case in hand. Lebanon has been a case for a long time. We know that the situation is much worse for low-income countries. Over 60% of low-income countries are at or near that distress. And we see middle-income countries that traditionally would be with strong fundamentals, avoiding falling in that category, like Ghana, now being in it. Ghana has also approached the fund.
Do you anticipate that 2023 is going to be far worse than 2022?
It would be worse. How much worse depends on variety of factors that we don't know. The longevity of the war, whether there would be any other shock. But there is one factor in our hands, how collaborative we are. The more we work together, the less pain there will be.
And you can catch that entire CNBC-TV18 exclusive conversation at 9:30 p.m. right here on CNBC-TV18. And from one newsmaker to another, HSBC Group Executive Noel Quinn is bullish on India, citing that the company intends on staying in the country for the long term. Speaking exclusively to me, he said HSBC will never do business in the cryptocurrency market, though, due to its volatile nature. He also said that strong demand and robust FDI inflows will help India withstand a global economic slowdown. Take a look.
I think India is extremely well positioned to ride out an economic slowdown. It has strong domestic demand. It has good FDI, $83 billion worth of FDI last year, strongest ever. It's starting to build up good trade flows. So I think India is well positioned to ride out an economic slowdown. Crypto, I think I've made my views fairly clear. As a bank, we're not getting into the crypto world. Crypto trading, crypto exchanges. I do worry about the sustainability of the valuations of crypto, and I have done for a while. I'm not going to predict where it will go in the future. One of the problems with crypto for me is it's hard to predict where it's going to go in the future. It's too volatile. And as a product, I question the suitability of that product for many of the consumers in the marketplace today.
And you can catch the full interview with Group Chief Executive of HSBC, Noel Quinn, at 10:30 p.m. on CNBC TV18. In an effort to curb the sharp rise in prices and ensure domestic availability of rice, the government has banned the export of broken rice and imposed a 20% duty on the export of non-basmati rice. Explaining the rationale behind these restrictions, the Food Secretary Sudhanshu Pandey said that exports of broken rice have seen an abnormal jump of over 300% in FY22 versus FY19. The IMF chief, meanwhile, said that India is being selective in imposing and removing curbs, also adding that these restrictions undermine open and free trade. The IMF has cautioned against what it believes is food protectionism.
Broken rice, which was almost around 15-16 rupees, this has also gone to 22 rupees. If you see the export in last 4 years of the broken rice, then 4-year scenario, not these 4 months, but the entire year, also it is more than 300%. From 12 lakh metric ton, it's almost touching 40 lakh metric ton last year.
What India is experiencing is a harvest that is quite problematic because of weather conditions. India has almost 1.4 billion people to feed. This being said, it is not in the interest of India to entice others to go for that kind of restriction because it undermines open and free trade that is beneficial for India. So as India did last time around, when there was a restriction imposed and then it was relaxed, when there was clarity that the food situation is not as dramatic, I would really hope that we would see the same conscious and careful action this time around. The sooner, the better.
On to corporate news. Federal Bank's MD and CEO Shyam Srinivasan has dismissed talks of the bank's merger with another bank. His clarification comes amid rumours of the bank being in initial talks with Kotak Mahindra Bank for a merger. Speaking exclusively to CNBC TV18, Srinivasan said the bank is not up for a merger. He went on to add that the bank will consider acquiring businesses with high margins and a quality franchise.
Besides making an exchange clarification, I made it very clear that A, there is no such conversation, nor is there a requirement for it. We've been for long building something that's special. I've always mentioned we are trying to build the most admired bank. Loan growth will be better as it has been in our first quarter, and I see no reason why that should slack off in second or even following quarters. The margin is a function of many things, as you probably know. One is the cost of funds is only one element. How is the slippages and therefore the reversal in interest income is another, and the shape or the mix of business.
Well, that's Shyam Srinivasan, a federal bank, clarifying. Now, the government is taking steps to crack down on illegal loan apps. The finance minister chaired an important meeting today where it was decided that the RBI will prepare a white list of legal lending apps, and only those apps will be available on app stores. Sapna Das joins us now with the details. Sapna, so the government cracking down on loan apps.
Certainly, this is a government crackdown on illegal applications, and this is followed after an important meeting that was chaired by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, where she has expressed a lot of concerns, various concerns, a lot of concerns on these illegal applications. Hence, some important directions that have been given and will be followed suit. Number one, RBI will be whitelisting only the legal applications. Once this whitelisting is over, only those applications will be allowed to be hosted on app stores. That's one. Second, payment aggregators will have to register themselves. Any unregistered payment aggregator will not be allowed to function beyond a certain time frame. This time frame, of course, will be decided by RBI. RBI will also be cancelling the license of dormant NBFCs. And taking any kind of a stringent action that's required to basically rein in these illegal applications. There has been a lot of history to all of this. In fact, if you look at the ED searches and raids against some of the online payment gateways like Razorpay and some of them, ED had certain grounds for those raids and surveys. So all in all, government has taken an important decision in terms of reining in these illegal applications, and anybody who's not found following the rules and regulations is out of the system.
Sapna Das reporting there. Multiplex chains PVR and ILOX cumulatively lost over 800 crore rupees in market capitalization as mega budget Hindi movie Brahmastra is open to tepid reviews from critics and viewers. Made on a budget of 410 crore rupees, the Ranbir Kapoor-Alia Bhatt starrer is the most expensive Bollywood film to date. So this is the latest film to crash at the box office, and that is bad news for exhibitors. Now, today is World Electric Vehicle Day. The EV market was still in its infancy a few years back, but in the last few years, we've seen a rapid growth. Sonia Shenoy charts up the evolution of the electric vehicle market.
So on the occasion of World Electric Vehicle Day, I decided to take the new luxury electric vehicle from Audi, the e-tron, out for a spin. Let's go! Did you know the electric vehicle market across the world has grown at a compounded rate of 50% between 2019 and 2021? In the US alone, the electric vehicle market size was $24 billion in 2020. That is projected to grow to $140 billion by 2028. That's a compounded growth rate of 25% between 2021 and 2028. Those are some staggering figures. But even in India, according to Bloomberg data, India, which falls under the rest of the world region, has seen outsized growth of 90% in electric vehicles in the last 3 years. Also, India contributed more than a third of the rest of the world's sales in just the first 6 months of 2022. Let's assess India's growth numbers, shall we? Over the last 3 years, sales of EVs in India have risen from just 4,800 units in 2020 all the way to almost 20,000 units in 2022. That's a growth of 300%. Company-wise, Tata Motors is the largest selling EV company with sales of 17,855 units in 2022 so far. However, there are still many challenges in the mass global adoption of electric vehicles. The biggest issue currently is the energy crisis across major developed cities in the world. California, for example, has asked electric car owners not to charge their cars during peak hours because of the load on the power grid due to the heat wave. Even in India, issues like range anxiety, lack of charging stations, inadequate battery swapping technology are some impediments to the fast adoption of EVs. Nevertheless, the future is looking bright and India's electric mobility journey is gaining momentum. KPMG expects 50 million EVs on Indian roads by 2030 compared to just 1.4 million currently.
Well, that's the electric vehicle landscape in India. Time for us to head into a break, but up next, the UK and the world mourn the death of Queen Elizabeth II. India declares a one-day mourning on September 11th. King Charles greets the crowds at Buckingham Palace. Britain's longest-serving monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, died yesterday at the age of 96. A statement from the Buckingham Palace said that the Queen died peacefully at her summer retreat, the Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The Queen's eldest son, Charles, will now be known as King Charles III, is the new monarch. He will be officially proclaimed king tomorrow. A reign spanning 7 decades, the late Queen Elizabeth was a symbol of constancy through years as Britain went through its shares of upheaval. From Winston Churchill to Liz Truss, 15 prime ministers served the UK during her reign. Here's a look back at the life and times of Britain's longest-serving monarch, Queen Elizabeth II.
For much of the world, she was simply the Queen. The longest-serving monarch in England's history, Queen Elizabeth's reign lasted more than 70 years. Born into the royal family in 1926, Elizabeth spent her entire life in the public eye. The pageantry of her 1947 wedding to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten in Westminster Abbey was just a prelude to an even bigger event, her coronation as Queen at the age of 26, following the death of her father, King George VI. During her reign, the Queen visited dozens of nations and served as the head of Great Britain's military in times of strife. She had a daughter and 3 sons, but was troubled by the marital problems of her children, including the divorces of Prince Charles and Prince Andrew. While generally popular, the Queen was sometimes criticized as aloof, including her delayed address to console a grieving nation following the tragic death of Princess Diana.
And may we, each and every one of us, thank God for someone who made many, many people happy.
Good evening, Sally.
But Her Majesty's sense of humor was on display for the London Olympics in 2012. A short film seemed to have her parachuting alongside James Bond into the game's opening ceremonies. She was also witness to the wedding spectacles for her grandsons, Prince William with Kate Middleton, and later Prince Harry with Meghan Markle. But tensions associated with palace life led Harry and Meghan to relinquish their royal duties and move with son Archie to the U.S. Their interview with Oprah Winfrey detailing the turmoil left the Queen saddened, but she said they would always be much-loved family members. Mere days after that controversy, Her Royal Highness endured the passing of Prince Philip, her husband of 73 years. It left her without her beloved partner for the final portion of her reign. A platinum jubilee earlier this year marked the Queen's 70 years on the throne, although she missed a number of those events due to what was described as discomfort. Her passing closes a tenure that left an indelible mark on all of England, as well as the world. Mark Barker, NBC News.
70 years on the throne. Sanjay Suri reports from outside the Buckingham Palace, where people mourning the death of the Queen have been arriving in large numbers.
So the expression of grief is now being layered over by a show of pageantry, as expected for an occasion like this. The British do make a great choreographed event of any funeral, and this one more than any others earlier, and we had two huge funerals by way of the funeral for Margaret Thatcher, for the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth's mother, earlier for Princess Diana. But this is the first time in a long time that a monarch has passed away, and the ceremony will outdo anything we have seen before. It's begun on the very first day after the death. We had the 96-gun salute being sounded outside the palace and in parks and at venues across the whole country. 96, of course, to mark the 96 years of her life. King Charles will address the nation, and then there will be a service at St. Paul's seeking blessing for the new reign while mourning the passing of the old. Members of Parliament have gathered to express their condolences, each making a speech. Everyone who had anything to do with the Queen, any association, is now talking about it, sharing their stories, sharing their experiences. And of course, these have all been warm experiences, and the praise that is flowing is fulsome. Following this, we will have an announcement about the funeral that also will be, to put it rather plainly, a grand event. The coffin will be brought to London from Balmoral and Edinburgh. Then on, it will be at Buckingham Palace, followed by a state viewing inside Westminster Hall within the Houses of Parliament. Then the funeral ceremony to take place eventually at Windsor Castle, which is really the private royal home of the family. But before that, we will have a service at Westminster Abbey, which will be attended by several heads of state. So there's a lot to watch out for before anyone can finally say goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II.
Sanjay Suri reporting from London. Back home, a busy day in court. Ashmit Kumar is here with a lowdown on all the important hearings in the court corner. Ashmit.
Well, the Supreme Court had a busy day today, a number of important cases on its plate. We bring you highlights of three such cases that got taken up today. First up, Curly's, the iconic restaurant cum bar in Goa. Keep in mind that in the second half of yesterday, the NGT had directed for a demolition of that facility. The NGT had said that they have violated coastal zone regulations. Subsequently, the demolitions began early in the morning today, even before the court proceedings could begin. But the Curly's counsels, they rushed to the Apex Court, they argued their case, and finally the Apex Court has decided to grant an interim stay, so no further demolition will take place. However, in the same breath, the court also directed that no commercial activities will take place. So Curly's, the iconic bar, will remain shut in Goa. Keep in mind that Curly's recently hit the headlines. BJP leader Sonali Phogat was allegedly drugged at this facility, and she was later declared dead at the St. Anthony's Hospital. Case number 2 is that of Siddique Kappan, the Kerala-based journalist who is facing trial under the UAPA. What's important is that the UP government, their application for bail, his application for bail was taken up. The UP government argued that they cited allegations of incitement to riots, cited pending investigations. However, the apex court would have nothing of it. The Supreme Court, in fact, the CJI himself observed that one, he's been in jail for nearly 2 years. Number 2, no charges have been filed against him as of yet. And third, the toolkit that has been cited by the prosecuting agency, by the police, it merely seems to be an appeal for justice for the Hathras victim. So, granting bail, he will be in Delhi for the next 6 weeks, subsequent to which he can then travel back to his residence in Kerala. Which brings us to the third and the final case. That's the Bilkis Bano case. This is the case that has been filed, which is challenging the decision of the Gujarat government to commute the sentence of 11 rapists in the brutal Bilkis Bano case. Today, the Supreme Court saw it fit to issue a notice to these 11 rapists, asking for their response to this application, which is challenging the commuting of their sentence. The Supreme Court will take up this case for further hearing in 3 weeks' time.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. The Supreme Court has also agreed to hear a plea seeking criminalization of marital rape. The hearing will take place on the 16th of September. The plea in the apex court followed a split verdict from the 2 judges of the Delhi High Court in May, when one of the judges had declared that marital rape is unconstitutional, while the other gave the opposite verdict. And on that note, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour, but we leave you with images of Mumbai bidding farewell to its beloved Ganpati Bappa. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great weekend.